This tutorial will show you how to solve equations with fractions or mixed numbers, but using a calculator. So by the end of this video, you should be able to solve one-step equations with constants or coefficients that have fractions or mixed number values. And in order to do so, you need to be able to identify the variable, determine the correct inverse operation, and use a property of equality to isolate the variable. So I'm going to be modeling using one of these types of calculators today. The blue one on the left is the TI-30X2S, and the fraction button is this little ABC value. The one in the middle is the Desmos.com scientific calculator, and the one on the right is the TI-84 Plus graphing calculator. So I'm going to show the middle one, the Desmos, and the far right one, the TI-84. So let's get started. Pause the video if you'd like to look over these examples, but these are provided for you in your class notes. So what we've been learning so far is that in order to solve an equation, you first have to identify the variable and the operation that's being performed on it. So for this equation, it's adding of 3, and the inverse of that is subtracting 3. But a property of equality states what you do to one side of the equation, you must do to the other to keep it balanced. Now, as long as you do the same thing to both the left and the right side, that's considered fair. So I could subtract 32 if I want from both sides, but it's not very helpful. The reason I'm choosing to subtract 3 is because these two values here are additive inverses, which means that a positive 3 and a negative 3, they make 0, right? So the whole point is to cross that value off to eliminate the constant and rewrite this problem with a single variable and no operation being done or performed to it. So let's use this model to help us through a problem that has a fraction. So the entire process is the same. Identify your variable n, look for the operation that's being performed on it, and do the opposite. So the opposite of adding 1/4 is subtracting 1/4. And we're going to do that fairly to both sides. The additive inverses become 0, and I don't need to write that. And now I'm going to use my calculator here to do 5/6 minus 1/4 to speed this process up. So let's take a look using this TI-84 graphing calculator. So the fraction button is here in the alpha y equals menu. Alpha y equals. I'm going to choose number 1 since I have just a proper fraction here. 5/6. And then I'm going to arrow to the right to get out of that fraction. And I'm going to subtract alpha y equals another fraction. So the answer is 7/12. And that's it. Let's take a look at another problem. Find your variable, perform the opposite operation. Cross off your inverses, and get your calculator ready. Again, the fraction button, alpha y equals. That's not so bad. Now what if you had a mixed number? Say something like this. What you'd want to do is use a different button on your calculator, but the same process. So watch what happens this time. Instead of choosing the first choice, number 1, numerator, denominator, we could also choose the second choice, unit, numerator and denominator. Well, my first fraction, 11/18, is proper, so I'm going to choose choice number 1, 11/18. Then I'm going to add a mixed number. So this time, I'm going to choose number 2. And there's my unit, 3 2/3. 77/18. Now, there's no need to convert that to a mixed number, but you certainly could if you would like to. Let's see what happens if we did 77 divided by 18 on our calculator. So I know that the whole number would be 4. The unit would be 4. Not exactly sure what that fraction there would mean, right? So we could convert it on our own, or we could simply do 18 times 4. So we know that it goes in 4 times, because 18 times 4 is 72. And 77 minus 72 is 5. So the remainder would be 5. So 4 5/18. Let's just double check that. 5 divided by 18 should have the same decimal value. And it does. Let's try using the Desmos Calculator. Identify your variable. Write the inverse operation. And now let's take a look here. So for this one, let me minimize this here a bit. For this one, we need to use this A over B button. That's the fraction button here. Now, once you insert a fraction, if you have a mixed number like 5 1/3, you need to press this left arrow to write the unit. Then you can press the right arrow to fill in the fraction. 1, and on my keyboard, I'll press the down arrow. And now, I'm going to enter the subtraction button, and then the fraction key again. Again, back arrow to enter my unit of 8. 8 1/2. Now, this is a pretty long decimal. And I told you in class, if the question starts with fractions in it, the answer should also be in fraction form, right? We're not converting from one form to another. If it's given in fraction form, keep speaking fraction form. Now, the Desmos.com calculator is very easy for this because there's a little button over here with a circle around it. And if you hover over it, it says convert to fraction. So I can take this ridiculously long decimal number, click this button one time, and convert my answer to a fraction. So the answer is A is equal to -19/6. Again, you do not need to convert it to a mixed number. Leaving it in improper fraction form is perfectly acceptable. So why don't you try a couple of these on your own? Pause the video now. All right, it's time for the solutions. Let's see how you did. Hopefully you got those 4 right. Now, what we just modeled in this video showed you how to add or subtract to isolate your variable. But what if your fraction is not a constant? What if it's a coefficient? Say like these 2 examples here. Pause the video now and take a look at these 2 examples that I provided in your notes. All right, let's get started with a few together. Remember, when you have a coefficient, typically the inverse operation is to divide both sides. And that gives us this nice answer. But instead of dividing by 3, you can also multiply by the reciprocal of 3. You can use parentheses to show multiplication as well. These are multiplicative inverses, which means they reduce to a 1. But when our coefficient is 1, we usually leave it invisible. 12 times 1 is 12, and 12 divided by 3 is 4. Again, I got the same answer as when I divided both sides by 3. So why did I go through the hassle of multiplying by the reciprocal? Well, if we take a look at this example over here, we typically don't divide fractions by other fractions. Right? This is called a complex fraction. And although your calculator can clearly do this without any help from you, it doesn't really show any understanding on your part. So we don't divide fractions, but we multiply by their reciprocal. So when you solve this, your work should look like this. Multiply by 4/1. In this case, if the denominator is 1, you don't even have to write it like that. Right? You could have written just a 4 here. But leaving it as 4/1 kind of helps us when we're trying to multiply our numerators and denominators. Again, these are multiplicative inverses. And over on the right-hand side, we would get 20/6. Right? We could certainly use our calculator and it would reduce it for us. So it is okay to leave it as an improper fraction, but it's never okay not to put it in simplest form. So 20 and 6 are both even, right? So 2 can go into 20 10 times and 6 3 times. So this is the final answer we're actually looking for. Let's try another one. 1/2 x is equal to 3/2. Again, the inverse of multiplying is dividing, but we don't divide fractions by other fractions. So we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. Now I'm giving you some easy ones to start off here, but you can certainly use a calculator. This one came out to be a whole number. All right, again, a coefficient is multiplying a variable. Since the coefficient is a fraction, we will multiply by the reciprocal. Just to give you some practice with your calculator, let's take a look how this would play out on the Desmos.com. Again, here we go. Clear out our calculator. And we're going to press the fraction button over here on the right, a over b. So 3/14, and then we're going to multiply by fraction 7/5. Okay, so 0.3 is the correct answer, but again, I don't want you going from fraction form to decimal form, so why don't we press this circle button here at the end to convert it back. 3/10. Now this time, let's try it using the graphing calculator. 3 1/2 x equals 1 3/4. So you cannot do any multiplying or dividing if you have a mixed number. So this one needs to be converted to improper form. So this one here is going to be 3 times 2 makes 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. And the same is true for the fraction that is the solution. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. Now I can perform my inverse operations. Multiply by the reciprocal. Again, to review how to do the fractions on the graphing calculator, you're going to press the alpha y equals button. So alpha y equals 7/4, arrow to the right, multiply by 2/7. That was easy enough. All right, pause the video and give these two a try. Okay, let's see how you did. Hopefully you're getting the hang of solving an equation that has a fraction as a constant or as a coefficient. Good luck!